playback, so here we go. All right, nice. There were problems in the video playback, audio errors and things like that, so we're going to see if this plays through completely here.
You've been genetically manipulated repeatedly.
Step out into space. Is it possible?
Mr. President, no such project exists.
It's outside the realm.
We are a part of an infinite community of life. The human race is not alone. We've never been alone.
Ancient people used the phases of the moon as a sort of community housekeeping to plan important events like weddings, farming, even wars. There are still those who follow the lunar cycles for their personal housekeeping. Scott Davis takes a stroll by the light of a silvery moon.
Steady drumbeats guide a moonlight meditation.
I think I just feel drawn to it.
I'll give it a try and see what it's all about.
The full moon is about letting go.
It could mean 10 different things to 10 different people.
Dee Vlahos is the mistress of tonight's full moon ceremony.
The full moon ritual will begin with the chiming of the bell.
But before the event began, she led me through a sand and stone labyrinth, its purpose to provide a pathway for the feet while allowing the mind and spirit to roam free.
Can you feel like a sense of peacefulness?
No, because I'm thinking too much.
Oh, okay. You just gave a perfect reason as to why people come and walk. So many of us are in our heads all day long. We're driving home and we're thinking of everything we have to do tonight. Very rarely do we ever get out of our heads and we're not present. We're not here in the now. And when you walk in the labyrinth, you're here in the now. And that is very hard for some people to do, especially those who have a lot of mental activity.
Soon, people arrive for the evening's activities. They are smudged before entering the labyrinth. The sage smoke is said to cleanse and purify the spirit.
Energy of the spirit keeper of the south. Be the fire within us. Be the flame within our hearts. Be here in this hour. Blessed be.
She calls upon spirits of all four directions, all four seasons, the four elements, earth, fire, air, and water. The labyrinth symbolizes the native medicine wheel and the wheel of life.
So that, for example, the center is like the spiritual point. The north is the grounding point. The east is beginning or change. And the south is energy. And each one has its own, like it is winter, spring, summer, and fall. Each has its own direction. So it's almost as if when you complete the wheel, it is symbolically how we live our life, from birth all the way through death.
Joy Sackstein participates in a similar ritual every month.
Like we walk in with like a bag on our backs, which is our worries, our sorrows, our fears, our tears. And hopefully in a full moon we relinquish that and we get the opportunity to let go of what we carry.
For this couple, a unique date night.
Open to new experiences, and I was thinking, I have nothing better else going on today, and I'll give it a try and see what it's all about.
It kind of reminded me of walking other people's path. Like we're all on the same path. Here we are, like how many people have walked this path before? And I'm another one of them, and how we're all connected.
I was like, I want to go to bed, just peaceful and not a million things running through my head before I go to sleep. And so that's what I was focusing on when I was walking through. And
That's kind of like what we need our lives to be. that even though there can be dark times, like at the sign of the new moon, the light always comes back. The light is there. All you have to do is remain positive and stay in that positive spiritual space, and the new moon will eventually become the full moon with light again.
Tonight's full moon ceremony was as much for the individual as it was for the world. The 30-some-odd people who walked this path will wake up tomorrow morning feeling a little something extra growing inside them. Maybe feelings of serenity, love, respect, consideration for others. And those are seeds worth planting.
Okay, Scott, you say in the beginning of that story that you didn't really feel anything. Did that ever change for you?
You know what? It didn't that night. But I went back on my own and I had what I can only describe as an out-of-body experience.
Wow.
I was so focused on what Dee was saying, the words she was using, the emotions she wanted to bring out of all of us, that I felt some kind of connection. Something happened and I about collapsed.
My goodness.
I took a deep breath, my eyes flew open, and it was over.
Wow.
And for the rest of that night, I felt more relaxed, more calm, so I have to say something happened.
Sounds pretty powerful. Yeah. All right, thanks, Scott. Now, visitors in the night. Frightening experiences that some say are just the result of an overactive imagination. But Kathy Rankin shows us that more people than you realize may have had a close encounter.
For many people, aliens, extraterrestrials are a joke. Sculptures like these, novelty items. But as I walk through this artist's studio, there's nothing to laugh about. These works represent an age-old struggle to find meaning and purpose. And after years of mental anguish, this artist may have her answers.
Cynthia, take about 3 deep breaths and just relax your entire body. You can remember everything you see and do.
In a trance, Cynthia Crawford relives the past.
But their eyes are different.
A memory that terrified her for years.
When I was 3 years old, I began having fears of going to sleep at night and remembered little people, I called them the little people, coming in at night, and I always felt like they had something to do with my feet. They would pull me out of bed by my feet.
I think the most fascinating case to me would be Cynthia, who has had an ongoing relationship with a variety of beings.
Psychotherapist Dr. Ruth Hover has studied hundreds of cases of alien abduction. Now, Dr. Ruth, when people come to you, they're terrified from their experiences. How do you begin to explain what's happening to them?
Well, first, I don't explain to them what's happening to them. I let them tell me. And then my first effort is to relieve their anxiety by letting them know they're not alone. And then we can explore the phenomena together.
And what happens when you start exploring it deeper with more detail?
Sometimes they'll get more recall. Other times you'll get a sharp reduction in the anxiety when they know they're not alone. And then they begin to explore the phenomena and it begins to make a certain kind of wacky sense to them.
Is it through hypnosis?
Sometimes. Sometimes we use hypnosis when people are tremendously blocked and frightened still. And fear doesn't go away overnight, but when they realize they're not alone and that someone understands the phenomena, then we can talk about it and they get some relief. You're going to go down underneath memory to where you can re-experience the time that I'm going to take you back to.
We're in a cabin in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I'm going to have an encounter. And I've been waiting for a couple days to have an encounter. And then suddenly, I'm on the road. I'm on a dirt road out by the cabin. And I see something in the sky I get down on my hands and knees and I cover my head. And I'm laying there on the ground because I'm not sure if this is real.
Many people are skeptical of Cynthia's encounters, and I asked her how she deals with it.
It used to bother me, and then one day I got a telepathic message that said, these are experiences for you, just for you, so that you can help the world.
The encounters Cynthia describes are familiar not only to Dr. Hover, but to other researchers and experiencers.
Sometimes what you get with experiencers are they will come in somewhat traumatized from an involuntary contact or an abduction report, and then as it becomes more and more familiar, it becomes congruent with phenomena is widespread.
How widespread? The Roper organization polled thousands of people. The stunning result, 1 in 50 Americans has what are called positive indicators of abduction memory. And while memory may not be absolute proof, those who have the memories report similar encounters.
There's the tall whites.
There's the little blue dwarfs. There's the brown.
Cynthia feels driven to give these memories physical form. Her sculptures are so vivid.
Perfect strangers will look at her sculptures and say, I know that guy. I recognize that.
While sculpting helps her connect with other abductees, it is the hypnotherapy that helps her connect with the beings and with the reason it's happening.
They told me I have a mission to perform on this planet and that I was very important to help awaken people.
Cynthia's visitors tell her the Earth and its people are in danger. Ancient prophecies warn of a major change coming. Still in trance, Cynthia receives a message for mankind.
What happens next?
They talk to me telepathically. They told me there were 3 things that humans needed to know before they can spiritually evolve and survive the coming earth changes. Humans must give up greed, judgment, and prejudice.
Humans must relinquish greed, judgment, and prejudice. That is their message?
Yes.
Do you feel relieved now that you know those things?
Yes. And I'm very tired now.
Alien abductions, the stuff of fantasy, or perhaps a fantastic vision of the future?
Paranormal events occur every day to normal people. For more information or to share your experience, your photos, videos, or stories, visit paranormalmatrix.tv. You may discover that paranormal is more normal than you realize. We'll be right back. How far back can you remember? Age 5? Maybe age 3? Experts say it's possible for us to remember before we were born, and events that occur both inside and outside the womb actually shape our personality. Paranormal Matrix correspondent Greg Stewart has the story of what makes us the way we are.
What makes us the way we are? Why are some people just happier than others? And if we're all shaped by our experiences, then when does that shaping process really begin? Psychologist Dr. Jenny Wade studies consciousness at the extremes of life. She knows that our brain is functioning prior to birth and just after death, and events that occur to us during our fetal development period can determine what we're going to become before we're even born. Jenny, give us an idea of how important that fetal period for development is in forming the person and what they're going to be throughout their life.
The 9 months of gestation are probably the most foundational in determining who we are, how we think, and what we become during life. Although most people didn't traditionally think of that a lot was happening from conception to birth, that's the time when the brain is forming. But in fact, when you talk to people, we learn that people can remember events going as far back as their conception, and they're deeply marked by these. The person we become is very much a reflection of what happened during the first 9 months of life.
All of us have a deep archive of fetal memories. We just don't have an easy way to access them. Regression therapy through hypnosis or progressive relaxation can take us back to that fetal period and help us remember these events. Jenny, when adults are regressed and they undergo regression therapy, give us an idea of what types of events they typically remember, what they recall.
Most people recall highly emotionally charged events, anything that carries a lot of trauma or a lot of excitement. Usually the mother's first announcement that she's pregnant, her discovery that she's pregnant. Other emotionally charged times, for instance, if something happens such as the father loses his job or has other strong feelings about maybe the sex of the child. These are the kinds of things that people tend to remember, and we play out some of these dynamics unconsciously the rest of our lives.
In this regressed state, we discover that the fetus is extremely sensitive to a wide variety of emotions and aware of events both inside and outside the womb. But how does the fetus communicate? Obviously, speech is out of the question, but a much more amazing process takes place as two distinct voices express fetal consciousness, and their level of awareness is overwhelming.
The fetal voice, or what I call the fetal voice, and the transcendent voice are experienced by the person as one unified sense of self. They're not aware necessarily that they're seeing things from two different vantage points, but when you really look at the records, these become quite clear. One source seems to be limited to the fetal body. It's inside the body, and it has the viewpoint of the fetal body. It doesn't see anything outside the womb, and it talks about conditions inside. This voice is usually very survival-based, and it mostly talks about physical sensations, such as whether the mother's using pharmaceutical drugs or other chemicals, maybe to sustain the pregnancy, or perhaps recreational drugs, perhaps she's smoking. The fetus can pick up all of this. Also, if the mother's highly distressed because her hormones are dumping into the fetus's bloodstream. There's another voice that seems to come from a transcendent source, and this is where we get information that is outside the mother's body, and it can say, what a predicament. This mother is very poor right now. She's just been abandoned by her husband. She's fearful, she's angry with him, and she's projecting this onto the baby. Survival is not paramount for that voice. It is sort of a clear, witnessing consciousness from a non-judgmental, completely compassionate point of view.
Two voices, one from within that focuses on survival of the fetus, and the other, a sort of detached observer who sees the whole picture and can relate to everyone involved. These two voices track the major role that fetal consciousness plays in personality development, and many times, trauma is at the center of the picture.
A particularly graphic story is one about a young man who was in a lot of difficulty with the law. He came to the attention of the psychological researcher after he'd been arrested more than 30 times for assaulting sleeping people in parks. He would come up to a sleeping individual and attack them with an instrument that he'd made himself. It was a very large metal hook that was attached to a piece of woven metal cable. It turned out that his mother was only a few weeks pregnant with him and just discovered that she was pregnant. And when she told her husband about it, he abandoned her and went to live with his mistress. She was completely overwhelmed, devastated by this loss, and decided to abort the baby, that she was just not up to having and raising a child on her own.
Fetal consciousness senses the trauma and sorrow of the mother, and a lifelong struggle begins for a child yet to be born.
She repeatedly tried to abort herself using the hooked end of a coat hanger. She was unsuccessful in all these attempts. So when the child was born, as he grew up, this boy began to self-mutilate. He would take pins and bend them into the shape of hooks, or take the biggest fishing hooks he could find and put them through the skin of his forearms, and particularly through his scrotum. And he usually complained that he never could find hooks large enough.
The experience in the womb is playing out in real life, and though the outcome in this case is inevitable, we can gather clues as we learn for the future.
There was no way at the time she was pregnant with him and began this abortion at 8 weeks, early in the first trimester, that he should have been able to sense or perceive any of these things. He didn't have sensory organs that were functioning to have this kind of experience. So she attempted repeatedly to abort this child, eventually being unsuccessful. And of course, the child never knew anything about that in a conscious way. And yet at 8 weeks, his scrotum and other parts would have been the lowermost parts in the womb where that hook was coming up. So when she was reaching up in there with this bent end of the wire coat hanger, those were the parts of his body that she was closest to touching. So even his own self-wounding mimicked the pattern of fetal experience that he had had.
Fetal consciousness is real, and our fetal development period sets the foundation for who we will become. Children ask their parents, "Where did I come from?" It's a question that tugs at the roots of their imagination. Psychologists ask, "Why are we the way we are?" That's a question that opens doors we can't imagine. One thing is certain, awareness and personality are developing from the earliest stages in life. And in the Paranormal Matrix, what we are is a mirror image of what we once were.
Join us next time as Paranormal Matrix works to expose the proof we all seek, the missing link between our world and worlds beyond our realm, where you'll discover that truth may be stranger than fiction. I'm Katie Cook.